Raise your hand if you've ever been in a car. Most of us, right? Now keep it raised if you're a woman. Did you know that you are 17% more likely to die in a car crash than a male counterpart, simply because of your gender? As a student passionate about science, a disturbing pattern has become clear, a pattern of missing data and missing perspectives. Today, I want to talk to you about an urgent issue that's quietly shaping the future of both medicine and innovation: the systematic erasure of women in scientific research, and how the rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives make it worse. Let's return to that car crash statistic. The average car crash test dummies used to design cars for safety have been modeled after the average male since the 1970s. The first female car crash dummy, known as Set 50F, was introduced in 2022 and was revolutionary, not for its advanced scientific techniques, because it finally acknowledged the basic anatomical differences for women: a shorter stature, different muscle mass distribution, and distinct spinal movements. These aren't minor details. They're life-saving considerations that were ignored for half a century, meaning that for 50 years, almost half the population was essentially ignored in car safety. The result? Higher fatality rates for women. Not because our bodies are more fragile, but because science refused to see us. You might be thinking, isn't science supposed to be objective? Doesn't data speak for itself? But here's the twist. The data is only as objective as the people who decide what gets measured. This systematic erasure extends to all branches of science. Let's take a look, for example, at pharmaceuticals, an area where this problem isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially lethal. Did you know women make up only 29 to 34% of participants in phase 1 clinical trials? These are the crucial early stages where we determine drug safety and dosage. Yet we're testing these drugs predominantly on male bodies, despite our knowledge that women often metabolize drugs differently. An example of this is the sleeping drug Ambien. For 20 years after its approval, women were experiencing dangerously high levels of morning after impairment rates. Studies showed that 15% of women showed dangerously high levels of the drug in their bloodstream after 8 hours, compared to only 3% of men. Several pharmacokinetic studies showed that the highest level of the drug in their bloodstream was 45% greater than that of men. And it wasn't until 2013 that the FDA finally required the dosage to be cut in half for women. These higher concentrations in women's bloodstream increase the risk of side effects or toxicity, and can potentially lead to more severe health issues. Moving away from pharmaceuticals, let's take a look at a real person. This is Tara Doherty from the UK. She started her period at 10 years old and spent 12 years battling extreme fatigue and pain, emergency room visits, and even a chemically induced menopause, all without a diagnosis. In 2019, she was finally diagnosed with endometriosis. 12 years of suffering without being listened to. And the saddest part about her story is that it's not unusual. It's actually the average. Endometriosis is a disease where cells similar to the lining of the uterus grow outside of the uterus. It causes severe pelvic pain and fertility issues. It affects about 190 million women globally, about 10% of reproductive age women. And yet, in the UK, the average diagnosis delay is nearly a decade long. Now, let's compare the funding. In the US, in 2022, endometriosis received only $16 million in funding. While this may seem like a really big number, that's just $1 to $2 per patient. In comparison, Crohn's disease, another painful chronic condition, received over $90 million, or about $130 per patient. Is Crohn's disease more serious? No. It just happens to affect men and women more equally and isn't stigmatized by reproductive politics. Now I want to ask you a question. What kind of science are we building if half the population is a medical afterthought? I want you to imagine that you're a researcher and you're trying to fix this problem. You write a grant proposal focused on women's health issues. You include terms like gender disparities or reproductive justice. But suddenly, your proposal is flagged or even rejected, not for lack of scientific merit, but because terms like these are politically charged. This is what happens when diversity and inclusion become a battlefield. It's not just symbolic. It directly affects who gets funded, what research gets done, and whose lives are prioritized. In 2023, in the US, the National Institute of Health's research grants were only 7.9% dedicated to women's health research. That's $3.4 billion out of a $43.7 billion budget. And this percentage has actually decreased since 2019 from 9.7%. Almost a decade later, and we're spending less money on women's health research, despite knowing better, despite having the data, and despite the clear evidence of harm. First, we need to revolutionize how we conduct scientific research. That means designing studies that reflect real-life population demographics from day one. It means rethinking what constitutes as a standard human body. And it means requiring our pharmaceutical companies to include sex-based analysis from the molecular level up. We need to make sure that everyone has access to clinical studies, particularly phase 1 clinical studies. Second, we need to hold our funding institutions and research bodies accountable. If we can design AI that can write poetry and rockets that can land themselves, surely we can develop drugs that work for all bodies. We can help solve this problem through global cooperation, such as creating an international women's health fund, similar to global climate change initiatives. This would take the pressure off already extremely tightly funded organizations. Finally, we need to transform how we think about scientific excellence, because science that excludes half the population isn't just incomplete, it's dangerous. We must make sure that the science we do includes everybody. We need to remember that diversity isn't about fairness. It's about connecting better science, science that sees the whole picture and science that serves everybody. The tools for change are already in our hands. The question is, will we use them?